I'm in Max. You are listening to Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. I'm in Max. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Hello.
Why, hello, and welcome to Season 25, Episode 9 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
My name is Kimmy.
And this is Tappy.
And Tappy will put his microphone on. And now it's on. In this episode of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast, we're going to discuss a GMing tips article I wrote in 1998, 20 years ago, and see how it holds up compared to what we think today.
21 years ago.
Oh, yeah, 21 years ago.
I
Right.
can drink.
Right.
Yeah.
Len from Miami chimes in on science fiction versus fantasy, which we talked about a few weeks ago. And Eric from New Jersey writes in about gaming and existing IP. Do we do that email once before?
I don't know. I'll have to, once we start reading
We'll find out. All right. But first, if you'd like to email us, and you should email us because we're getting very low on emails, you email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's
Come on, slackers.
Come on, slackers. happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. Come on, jackers.
Jackers, there you go.
And we also are on all of the social medias. We're on the Twitter and the Instagram and the Facebag and the MeWe. Happy Jacks RPG, all one word. Happy Jacks RPG, all one word. And we have a forum, happyjacksforum.com. That's happyjacksforum.com. If you'd like to watch the show live, you can do so on Friday nights at 7:12 p.m. Pacific time at happyjacks.org/live. And that's that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So happyjacks.org has been around as I've owned the domain.
Gaming resource.
I've owned the domain since the mid-90s. Mm-hmm. And in fact,
Since you guys wrote the song?
Yeah, it was that I got happy. I wanted to get happyjacks.com, but it was taken because by a bar or something. And
Weird.
I know. I've had people send me several pictures of Happy Jack's Tavern, Happy Jack's Pub, etc., all across country.
Yeah. There's a pancake house we got a picture of once. Happy Jack's Flapjacks or something like that. It was amazing. That's the one I really wanted to go
Happy
to.
Flapjacks.
Something? I don't know. That sounds wrong.
Happy Jack's Flaps.
Oh, no.
But once upon a time...
Sorry. I was going to say something that I shouldn't have, and I did it.
Good job.
Yeah, woo! Impulse control.
But at one point in the 90s, and actually through much of the aughts, happyjacks.org was Happy Jack's GURPS resources. And I bought a book for HTML3 and sat down and learned how to make a web page and built a web page using frames. No, it wasn't frames. I used tables.
I don't know what that is.
It's okay. And it had there was a bunch of stuff on there. And many of those articles still exist. You go to archive.org and you look it up in the 90s-ish, and you will find various articles. I wrote like a freeform magic system for GURPS that I put up there. I wrote an article about orcs. There was at one point there was information about a setting called the Ale Kings, which was about like society collapses. It's like a post-apocalyptic fantasy society, but the people who rise to become the monarchs over the society are the people who know how to brew beer.
I thought you were going to do something like the Goethe poem, The Earl King.
Yeah, I was going to say,
no.
that's right. I'm suddenly picturing like this Ale King hunter. I'm like, oh.
No, these are fat guys with aprons.
Mein Vater.
No, these are guys with like beakers and test tubes of yeast and things like that. And it was like the secret. That was the big secret. Is these people were the only people that knew how to brew beer, and the only people that they would teach would be the people who would succeed them when they died. So and like the most prized possession is their thermometers, because if you don't have a good thermometer, you're not going to make good beer,
Right?
Because you're not going to get the mash right. So anyway, one of the articles on there I wrote, and this article was from 1998, and I know it's from 1998 because I said in the preview or the introduction to this article that I started gaming in 1978, and now it's 20 years later, and I want to write an article about what I've learned about GMing. So
I was born in 1978.
there you go. So that means you were 20 when I wrote this article, and you were probably not legally allowed to drink.
No.
So I'm gonna go through 6 tips. I'm gonna go through and read them, and what I kind of want to do is see how this is sort of more of an experiment. How this advice holds up today, because certainly the hobby has changed. I've changed as a GM since then, certainly.
Yes.
And this is like right in the first couple of years of my gaming hiatus, so I wasn't really gaming much then, but I'd gamed a lot previously. So, the tip number 1: always be prepared. Now this is for GURPS, because this was a GURPS page. This is a GURPS fan page, right? Before your GURPS session begins, have your adventure ready. Always know what's going to happen after you have all sat down and finished with the small talk. If your players have things they want to do from the beginning, let them, but keep your game moving. Very often, I have been caught by surprise when there's a knock on the door. We're playing today? I say. Oops. Well, if you have a couple of adventure seeds in reserve, that's the time to bring them out. When I have a creative itch, it tends to last for a while, so I write a few adventure seeds, just a couple of paragraphs to jog my memory and get things started. If the players solve an adventure sooner than I expect, I have another adventure ready to begin right away. An unprepared GM is death to a gaming session. Oh. Always be prepared. Should I read them all, or do we do it one at a time?
Let's do one at a time.
Okay, all right.
Because I'll just forget what I was going to say.
Yeah,
like,
we'll just...
when you get back, you're like,
right.
Now. I mean, this is a very different way than I run games nowadays. Right?
Me too.
Yeah.
Right? Because you do world building, and then there's always shit to do because you have all these groups that are doing things or stuff is happening. Like, the world is untenable to just sit around and do nothing.
Right.
So they're going to do stuff. We also have players who make characters that have, like, internal reasons to do something. Like, they actually have desires. Like, I want to go do this thing, right? As opposed to sit around and wait for something to happen.
Right.
Like, I don't think that happens so much, at least in our groups anymore.
Very, very much so. Today, you have more agenda-driven players than you had back then, at least in my experience.
Right.
People would immediately, as soon as the world is described, they would say, "Oh, that's something we should take care of." They just come up with that right away on their own.
Right. But yeah, like the idea of adventure seeds and to have solved an adventure is a very different way of running games than I run nowadays. But I think like a lot of us run games nowadays.
Right.
Yeah. You can kind of see like the roots of that in there, though. You're like, oh, when you're on the fly and you're having like that's like kind of how you start. You're like, there's some ideas you'll have, and maybe you'll type something out a little bit ahead of time, and you can like put it in there. So there's a little bit of like the origin of Stu, the improv GM, but
kind of,
yeah, but not. I mean, not beat for beat, write it out. But I don't know. It seems kind of interesting.
I mean, I definitely will abandon like meta arcs today, and then I was a lot more reluctant to do that then.
Yeah.
But I've done that a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, that a lot of the stuff that's happening in the games now, like the major plot points that's happening, especially in the Traveler game, I didn't think of when I was prepping it.
Yeah.
Didn't expect me to start a cult. I don't know how you. I
Right.
mean, really.
See, then that's one thing I love about GM.
Yeah.
Is when the players do all these things and you get to wrap it in, and it completely changes.
Yeah.
As opposed to like keep your game moving.
Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah.
Well,
totally different attitude.
The thing here, keep yours in capitals.
It is in capital. Yes.
Your game. It is like in your mind in 1998. It is the GM's game.
Yep.
It's interesting.
There's more of that later.
Yeah. I mean,
There is also, I also want to say though, like if players have things they want to do, let them.
Yeah.
That becomes like so much more of how to run a game.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know, it's still there. It's just
Right.
Now, when you, just for a little bit of context, when you were writing this, you said that you just come off your gaming hiatus. You weren't really.
No, I was like a couple years into it.
Okay, so you had. Okay, got it. I misheard.
That
Okay,
gaming
sorry.
hiatus lasted probably 10 years.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Okay. Number 2, have the right attitude. For the players, a measure of a successful gaming session is easy to identify. Did I have fun? Did we accomplish the task we set out to do? Great, a success. The GMs, on the other hand, have to have a different attitude. Here, look
Oh,
at this,
man.
right? The GM is God, divine rule maker, grand antagonist. But more importantly, the GM is the entertainer. You are there to provide the players with a good, challenging, and fun game session. Always remember this. Yes, you are the chief antagonist, but don't lose sight of what you truly are, a partner in fun. If you find yourself resenting the players for beating your unbeatable foe, solving your unsolvable riddle, you need to step back and take a real reality check. Your purpose as a GM is not to, quote, beat, unquote, the players at the game you're playing. That's way too easy. You make the rule. It is.
No, I know. It's just funny.
You make the rules. Instead, strive to confound the players. Challenge their problem-solving skills. Stretch their role-playing skills by putting their characters in new, unfamiliar situations. Make the players want to solve your adventure. If they are going to succeed, let them. After all, they deserve it. Only in role-playing games can you explore the possibilities of worlds and people that will only exist in your mind. It is a wonderful, nearly mystic endeavor. Let your players enjoy the richness of the world and situations you have created.
I see a glimmer of the Stewino now.
I hate this, Stu.
Yeah.
Because he says the GM is God.
We've told this Stu so many times that they are a GMing nightmare.
Right. But the gist of it, I think, it still holds true.
Yeah.
Parts of
But
it.
there's also that idea of like, you are solely the entertainer. If they have fun, it is because of you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And you are God.
Right,
It's
well,
like,
yeah. And divine rule maker.
And divine role maker. Divine.
And grand antagonist.
Oh, Stu. Yes.
But I think the rest of it sort of redeems.
Yeah, like we've talked a lot about like how it's not your job to beat the players, and I think that's way too easy. Like especially when you're coming at it from the point of view of the GM is God, you can literally make anything happen. Of course, it's too easy to beat people when you're God. It's like you can make anything happen. That's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
like, oh, you had a heart attack. Well, can I roll it? No, you can't.
No, you can't. You're dead.
Oh, man, woo, this is rough.
Okay, yeah.
Make a fort save at minus 60.
Yeah. The chat wants to know if this article is still up somewhere.
I don't know. It might. I don't know.
GURPS researches?
I believe I got this from archive.org.
Okay.
If you go to archive.org and search Happy Jacks in the late 90s, early aughts, you'll probably find this page.
And some other probably amazing.
And some pretty amazing shit. So yeah, that guy sucked. All right. This one, I still stand by.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I like. Sorry, before we go into the last part, I do also like the put them in unfamiliar situations. Make the players want to solve your adventure. I think we've definitely have kind of moved away from that too.
Design an adventure the characters would want to solve is how I would put it today.
Yeah. Well, and also just kind of as you go, like create a story together that everybody's interested in.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I have in The Autumn People, I'm not going to say because spoilers, but a problem that the characters can solve a number of different ways. Mm-hmm. And there are ones that some characters like more than others, but they have, I mean, I think they're going down one certain path right now. But it's like, that whole thing of don't come up with...
That's the next one.
That's the next one. But, like challenge them, etc. It's like, yeah. I mean, this is a big problem.
Oh,
and it's like,
yeah.
can we fix that? Like, one of the questions, like, immediately was like, can we just fix that? It's like,
is there a Control-Z spell?
Can you? Like, do you want to figure that out? Like, cool. That can be the rest of the session.
Right.
Or the rest of the game is trying to figure that shit out.
All right. When designing problems or puzzles, don't determine the solution. When I create GURPS adventures, I come up with the situations and the problems, but I usually give little or no thought to the solutions to those problems. I do this for two reasons. Firstly, I don't want a preconceived notion as to how the game must go. If I have a solution in mind, I may subconsciously lead the players toward that conclusion. I want my players to have free rein in my worlds. I don't want them to feel like they're being led. Secondly, if I don't have any solutions in mind, whatever they come up with will probably be a surprise. I love it when my players surprise me. In fact, I encourage them to keep their plans secret until the time of execution. Such an arrangement keeps me on my toes and makes me a bit better GM.
I agree.
Yeah, I got one right.
Like 1.5.
I've had situations though where I've had a player like talk to me going, hey, when like the final confrontation happens, I would like to sacrifice myself. And I'm like, I can't promise you that, because if I know that's going to happen, that's kind of a bummer for me.
Right.
But like, if I try to set up this situation where you can do that, everybody else already, like, they don't have free reign. They can't determine what is going to happen, or they've lost that ability to, like, try something new, etc. Because I'm now setting it straight for, you're going to sacrifice yourself to save the party.
Right.
If you can, cool. But
you also have a randomizing mechanic.
Yeah.
That may or may not cooperate as well.
But even then, like, I try to, like, kind of keep it out of my mind, which is great because I just forget things immediately.
Right.
Because I don't want to, like, the same thing is, like, unconsciously, like, push it towards that, as opposed to letting the players do their thing and me just interacting with what they do.
Yeah.
I don't want to impose a plan upon them.
Right.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
Keep notes. This is number 4. As the players move through my game, visiting shops, meeting people, they often ask for the name of a person, place, or business. As you make these up, right?
It's the best game.
It's always been there. As you make these up, jot down the name and a brief description. That way, if they end up in the same area, things remain consistent.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could remember to do this.
Even better, have a player who's really good at taking notes.
Yeah.
We have several of those.
I give a player extra XP for taking notes.
Nice.
There you go.
Yeah, Pooja and Samantha, man. Yeah, we love you guys.
Number 5. Don't let combat bog you down. Here.
Yeah.
Well, I should say don't let combat bog you down unless you want it to. My games are always heavy on role-playing and character interaction, not combat. If you dig combat, have at it. But if you are looking for a more cerebral game, a game that doesn't emphasize combat, don't let the combat slow you down. If you don't know a particular rule, don't look it up, guess, make up something, keep the game moving. The only caveat is that you should make sure your players know you're going to run this type of game.
Yes.
Some players are rules lawyers, and they spend a lot of time studying rules and take pride in their knowledge of them. These sorts of players may be taken aback at the GM who makes up rules on the fly.
Yeah, I agree with all that. The only thing is with some of the rules, you need to make sure you know the rules that will impact the player's abilities that they've spent points on or whatever.
Right.
So those ones, you don't want to play fast and loose with stuff that is about their abilities that they've spent time and they've spent points on.
And they specifically built a character that can do this one thing,
one
and now
thing.
you've changed the rules for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, the rules are, like, essentially an agreement for, like, how things work. And, like, a lot of people know when I run a game, I'm going to just fuck with shit.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I want the game to feel like how I want it to feel, but I also want to be upfront with people when stuff doesn't work right, etc. Make sure that they don't feel cheated.
Right. Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last one, don't give hints. If you've presented the players with a problem and they are genuinely stumped, great. That's your job. Watch them flounder. Enjoy the puzzled looks. I still do this sometimes.
You do.
Just keep the game moving. If they can't figure out what to do, let them move on to something else. Whatever you do, don't just hand them the answer. Make them earn it.
I think it depends. This is a situational.
You've been at the brunt of this.
I have many a time.
Especially the vampire game.
Oh,
Poor
God.
Adrian.
God, just trying to balance the personalities in that game was like a nightmare. But oh man,
I'm not sure this is one of my best gaming.
Well, see, when it says a problem, what comes to mind is like you're trying to solve a mystery and you can't find a clue.
yeah,
You could be.
But I think what this does apply to is like not knowing who is behind something. It's really this person that they're interacting with all the time, but they're just not paying attention to really.
Right.
And so they're making assumptions about other people and then taking the adventure down those routes. Yeah, don't tell them that it's the guy right there. I mean,
Yeah.
have that person still do the thing, and there are clues that they could pick up on. But if they don't, it doesn't matter. Everything's still moving.
Right. I think where this would apply to, and I probably didn't intend it when I wrote this, is like moral conundrums.
Yeah.
Like when you're playing L5R and it's like, do we do the dishonorable thing,
And save
or do we
people?
do
Yeah.
the disloyal thing? Right.
Yeah.
And in Vampire 2, if the traditions are coming into conflict, those kind of things where you give those sort of moral or ethical conundrums.
Ooh,
That's
or
the
maybe
best.
not killing a human. Oh, sorry, we're talking about vampire. Yeah, no, everybody kills people in that.
You know,
one.
because I'm reading
Especially
V5.
now.
I'm reading V5, and one of the things it talks about is when they create their coterie is to come up with sort of like guidelines, like meta guidelines for what the game is going to be like, and one of the sort of sub suggestions is no killing. Which
Ooh, that'd be rough in V5.
yes, well, you're always going to have one blood die, one hunger die.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can get rid of that one hunger die is to kill. It's
Yeah.
the only way, and I think you can only do that at lower blood potencies.
Yeah.
With this one, I think you're right. I think there's also some really cool places where you can put it in, not just moral conundrums, but with like character conundrums, with like players, like player conflicts, things like that. I think the only situation, because I love fucking with the players, like that's one of my favorite things, like having them not know things. But the one thing I would say that this is like traps and shit like that in a dungeon. That is no fun. Like that's like the number one thing that pisses me off. I'm like, one, I'm in a dungeon, period. Like, okay, fine, I'll be in a dungeon, whatever. It's like, oh, there's a door.
Right.
Oh, yeah. It's like, okay, open the door. Open the door. And just like, oh, man.
Oh, the trap
that
happens.
bullshit.
Like,
Oh, God. Nope, that's not the one way you have to solve the fucking door. It's like, oh, please kill me now. Can
Right.
I jump off something in this game? Oh, wait, no, it's D&D. I can't jump off things and die.
No.
So,
Well, maybe at first level.
maybe
Yeah.
first level.
yeah, I think in AD&D it was like a 7th level or a 10th level character could not die falling from any height because of.
We figured that
Yeah.
same in 5th edition.
5th
I
edition.
don't remember. You
It was
were like
mine.
8th level or 9th
I
level?
think we were by then. And my
Yeah.
orc
Yeah.
warrior.
We only went
was
up to
like,
10th, I
yeah.
think.
It was like,
But
ta-da!
She's
And I
up there.
landed and I was like,
Fell a long way, like 50 feet.
like bounce.
I was like, oh man, and we looked it up and like, oh no, I've got a scraped knee. I need a Band-Aid, please.
Yeah.
Band-Aid for
Yeah,
50-foot fall,
yeah,
please.
like
Like,
one
oh
little,
man, I gotta stretch out my back.
Yeah.
one little minor healing thing. And it's like, oh, whew.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say about hints is in Seventh Veil, you have a corundum conundrum.
Yes.
Eh?
Oh, that's good. That's
Yeah.
very good.
Sorry, I said they're jewels. And
Yeah.
Oh.
And now, actually, that's a really good example. I'm glad you brought that. That is one situation where I agree also, even though it's not necessarily a dungeon, like, that is a mystery game. Like, that is a noir game that's set up for solving these mysteries together.
Right.
I'm a detective. That's a little bit different. And I think that is absolutely a situation where if you were getting, we sometimes get hints, but it's usually through something we've done. Mac doesn't like give them up. But that also helps really set the tone for the game, and I think that's appropriate in that game.
I think one of the tropes of like the hard-boiled / noir games is I figured out who it is, and it is completely wrong.
Yeah.
You know, you have that in Chinatown, where you go, I know what happened, I know what you did. No,
Yeah.
and then it's even more worse than you thought it was. And so, if people get the solution right away, you don't get those moments.
Yeah. And even like some of the things, like when you're finding things, if there's, you know, the actual object clues that you find in a mystery game like that, like are just like, even though they're similar, you might think that they're similar to like trying to open a trap in a dungeon or whatever, figuring out how to open a door. Those are a different type of puzzle, and they're, when people sit down for that type of game, they are agreeing to, hey, this is a mystery game. We're going to be looking for clues and putting puzzle stuff together.
Yeah, and in that one, it isn't the clue itself. It isn't finding the glasses that
Right.
is the puzzle. The puzzle is, what do the glasses mean?
Yeah.
But you shouldn't have, if they can't find the glasses, you can go,
Yeah.
you need to find, you need to get into the
Right.
pond.
Yeah. Like,
A couple things from the chat room. Bobcat says, "Sci. If you use the right falling damage rules, kill a character.
Yeah.
I don't think at 50 feet. I think we sat because I remember taking the book. I'm like, this can't be possible. Because the amount of damage you took was
Wait, are there rules that specifically like adjust it for
height,
like
distance?
or
It did.
I did.
The fastest speed you can go while
Velocity.
falling? What is that? Critical?
Terminal velocity.
Terminal velocity. Like, because somebody figured out what terminal velocity speed is, like how high that is, and worked that out. I think it was AD&D, and worked that out to you will survive
a number
it.
of dice. Someone did that in an old forum for GURPS once too. Because GURPS had it said, well, there's got to be a max, and someone said, well, let me figure it out. Okay, well, if you're landing at this, then your terminal velocity, because it would change depending on your altitude because the atmospheric density.
It's 100% possible that we fucked up a lot of rules in that game.
I
But
seem to remember opening the book and saying,
we did.
At any height, that's an exaggeration. But at 50 feet, I think we figured out how many dice it was. I think it was like a D6 per 10 feet or something. I don't remember what it was. But the maximum number we could roll was smaller than your hit point, total hit points.
But again, there's like that big debate online. Like Gygax meant for it to be like this.
Bobcat says that's it should be a geometric progression.
Maybe.
So the 10 feet is 1 die, the next one is 2 dice. No. What
does he mean?
So 50 feet was 15
geometric
D6.
progression? He said it would be 15 d6 at 50 feet.
I don't know. I would have to go back and look at the rules. It's been years, literally years since we played that game.
But that would mean it would double? No.
I don't know.
Does he mean that it's
1, 2, 4,
squared? No.
8.
What if it's like the Fibonacci sequence?
Probably.
Like
the golden ratio of die.
Oh, it'd be 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Okay. That would have killed you.
Oh, it's feet factorial. Oh. You fall 5 feet and die.
Oh, God. I got my shit. Okay.
All right.
I don't know. Well, I have to go back and look at it. And that was 5e. That wasn't. Yeah, that was not 4e. That was 5e.
It was 5.
Yeah.
It was in 5.
Yeah.
All right.
In 5th edition L5R, you have to figure out what all of those opportunities mean on your way down.
Right. Well, some of them can be like.
Sorry, we're such nerds. Like we all laugh cackling at that joke.
Oh,
I'm sorry, it just hit me all of a sudden. Like, oh man.
You can save some for the funeral. Oh, someone tripped at your funeral.
Oh man.
It would be summation, not factorial. Factorial would be multiplying all those numbers.
Yeah.
Although.
That's why I said fall 5 feet and die, because 5 factorial is 120.
No. Well, everything is in 10-foot increments.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
No, 10 factorial. Oh, fuck that.
Right. I don't have that many dice.
Many.
Well, I might. If I get all my community dice.
It's many. Like
I got a lot of dice. Certainly, Proby Tim has enough dice. He probably could do like 20 factorials.
Yeah.
Probably fill the planet with dice if he opened up all of his dice bags at once. His dice bags of holding. All right.
Better than douchebags with holding.
Right. So that was the article.
Should not have said that.
So if you have any comments on 21 year ago Stu, well, let's see, that would have been 32-year-old Stu. Wow. Oh, God. And you would like to write in with an email so I don't have to find an old article to read. You may do that.
I kind of like this though.
This is probably the only article on that page that is actually worthy of the topic.
They found it. Evidently you posted it on Douchey DM.
I may have.
Yeah.
I posted some of that older stuff up there.
I actually like a lot of the stuff on Douchey DM we posted like a number of years ago too. I'm kind of curious to like go back through that and be like, hey, what did I write?
I'm actually kind of shocked it's still there. I thought I'd deleted that whole thing. Because no one's posted there in years.
No, we haven't.
All right.
Fascinating.
Science fiction versus fantasy. Who was this from? Oh, Len from Miami.
Okay, I think my My
10 factorial?
arithmetic is wrong because I suck at it.
really bad.
But I think it's 3,628,800 dice you'd have to roll for 10 factorial.
I played Champions. I have that many in D6s. Thank you, Great Worm, for the joke,
Yes.
which I just stole from you. All right, science fiction versus fantasy from Len in Miami. Who would like to read?
I will read this one.
Sweet.
All right. Is that one? Okay. Hey, folks. Len from Miami here. I was about 60 episodes behind, but I'm almost caught up.
I'm sorry.
The Jell-O they serve here at the asylum is delicious. Tastes like remorse. On to the topic. You have recently had a discussion about the differences between fantasy versus sci-fi games. You covered the practicalities and the trappings, things like swords versus guns, the limits of communication and travel times, the impact of magic, etc. But you didn't hit on something that I think might be more important than all of that, which is feel. So it seems to me that, for the most part, fantasy games and sci-fi games feel very different. In general, fantasy games typically involve characters that are more empowered, not only in terms of personal power and how much ass they can kick, but also in terms of their ability to affect the larger world. Fantasy heroes tend to do big fantasy hero shit. They develop fantastical powers. They save kingdoms from dragons. They save whole worlds from evil overlords, etc. Fantasy games tend to have a more heroic or mythic feel to them, at least in the Joseph Campbell sense. And for the most, and more to the point, is the feel people seem to expect when you say fantasy. It's right there in the word.
Phantasm?
Fanta.
Fantasy.
Fanta?
Do you wanna fantasy?
No, in fantasy, like phantasm, like as something that is not real.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what it means.
See, when you say phantasm, the only thing I can think of is a sci-fi movie. So
That's the thing with the ball, right? With all the little spikes on it. Wasn't that it?
No, that's a horror movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, Phantasm. Wasn't it called Phantasm?
It might be.
Yeah.
I think it was.
All right, sci-fi game. Oh, and there's also the Batman movie that I can think of that too. Mask of the Phantasm, the animated. Never mind. Sci-fi games, on the other hand, typically don't feel like that. Sci-fi games tend to be about survival, about carving out a niche for yourself in an impersonal world that doesn't give a rat's ass about you, a world that will go on just fine whether you live or die. Whether it's Traveler, The Expanse, Cyberpunk, any flavor, including the magic-filled Shadowrun, traditional sci-fi tends to feel less heroic and more realistic, at least in terms of how powerful the PCs are, and more importantly, how impactful they are in the larger world. In a word, grittiness. In general, sci-fi games seem to feel gritty in a way that fantasy games just don't. Which makes sense, because to play fantasy at all, you kind of have to ignore or handwave a whole lot of awful stuff that boils down to, let's all be thankful we're alive now and not back then. To be clear, this isn't universal. You can have very heroic sci-fi like Star Wars, and to some extent Star Trek.
Can I just say, Star Wars is not science fiction, it is space fantasy. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't even put the word science in Star Wars.
Yeah, no, you can't. Because there are space wizards.
Right.
And you can have gritty, impersonal fantasy like Dark Sun, Warhammer, and maybe Old L5R, but these examples are exceptions. In fact, the fact that these settings deviate from the norm is part of what makes them interesting. When someone wants to play Star Wars, they want a heroic, fantastical sci-fi. So Basic Traveler or even the Expanse RPG will be a lousy substitute. It is a very specific thing, and it's more about feel than about trappings or technology. So, circling back to the original question, what feel do you folks prefer, heroic or gritty? Now which setting, sci-fi or fantasy? And why? As a teacher, I respect you asking us to explain our answers.
And show your work.
Yeah, and show our work. I will take, good job. Yeah, Tappy's got his math right there. I'll take my answers offline. Thanks, Len from Miami. P.S. For Stork, I think that this is part of what is so wonderful about superhero RPGs. Those games are usually set in the modern world, which we can't help but think of as more gritty than heroic, because we actually live here. But they tend to have a fantastical and heroic feel. That's a good point.
See, I've run a lot of. I don't know if I agree with this, because and I'll tell you why. a lot of my games start out, whether they're fantasy or science fiction, as the player characters being insignificant and then becoming insignificant by the end of this. Becoming significant by the end of the game, right?
Yep.
That's, I think, a fairly common arc.
Yeah.
Now and a first level D&D character is not significant. You got 8 hit points. You could get killed by rats. I mean, it's unlikely. You could get killed by falling 50 feet.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So many dice.
15d6.
Right. But to me, that arc from insignificance to significance is, at least for me, and I think for a lot of GMs, a very common thread for a campaign, regardless of the genre. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I mean, that the Exodus game is that. It started out, you guys are working for this NGO, and you're like, well, we don't really know what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And, wow, we're kind of really in over our heads a lot here. And
And now we're thieves.
and then you steal this fantastic ship that it just miraculously has all of these characteristics that...
Sure, it will be fine.
Right.
It will be fine.
As long as someone finds you. Someone says, hey, wait a minute. I recognize that boat.
That was my Traveler game. When I had them on, I had it set on an actual gas giant with their airships and stuff, and I had all the physics stuff so that it kind of fit within the Traveler world rather than it's magic. But I wanted the player characters just have a small trading ship and do Firefly adventures, and then through the course of it, suddenly they're there's a swerve to, wait a second, this one faction is doing something that's really fucked up, which was very true. And then they ended up embroiling or creating actually war between 2 different factions, which embroiled the entire planet in this huge war that they were the ones that ended and set about this kind of new era of less fucked up shit happening. They were the most impactful you could possibly be, except for maybe killing everybody. That'd probably be more impactful.
Right.
But they impacted literally everybody in that this game world's life by their actions in this game. When I wanted them to be oh man, how are we going to fuel the plane or fuel our airship?
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of the intention of a Traveler game. If you look at the rules that are there, the rules for trading and your ship shares and your ship payment schedules and things like that, that Traveler is kind of a hand-to-mouth game.
Yeah.
Yes.
At least that's the rule set is there to support that.
I mean, we've said a million times that the people who wrote Firefly must have played Traveler at some point in their lives.
But if you use the Psionics Handbook, a lot of that changes.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of that changes, and then it gets real fantasy real fast. And I think when he's talking here in heroic or gritty, I don't think those are the words we should be using. I think we should be using high or low. Because fantasy, we talk a lot about high fantasy and low fantasy.
Right.
Low fantasy is that kind of gritty stuff. And there's a lot of low fantasy stuff. I mean, I would say that Game of Thrones at least starts out as very low fantasy, where there's no magic, or they've heard of magic or something.
Right.
And even when it gets to the point where bad shit is happening, they got dragons and shit, but they're still not casting wish or whatever.
Yeah.
But with sci-fi, high sci-fi is much more difficult to find. But if you look at something like Eclipse Phase...
Okay, yeah. Give me some examples of what you consider high sci-fi.
Well,
sci-fi.
Eclipse Phase is transhumanist stuff where you have all these different sleeves you can put yourself into. Sickness is gone, that whole thing of people don't die of old age, and you can cast your consciousness out to Jupiter into a different body over there to do stuff. There is the stuff you can do is very similar to magic. We just sci-fi typically doesn't go that far. I mean, if you look at some of the Star Trek novels that were written after recently, where it's temporal shit.
Right.
I mean, that's fucking magic. They are doing magic.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, it's like the new Discovery, because they have that crazy ass drive where the ship kind of twists itself.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, if you look at like, I know I said it's not science fiction, but Star Wars. If you look at the Star Wars movies, that goes from a little kid, a little whiny piece of shit, whining about wanting to go to Tashi Station and being a farmhand and fixing robots for a living, to toppling an empire.
Right.
Right? Firefly. Hand-to-mouth ship, barely able to keep fuel in the tanks. Embarrass the Senate and let the world know about this horrible
Toppling
thing
an
that
empire,
happens.
Was that the
That's the movie.
intention though?
Well,
Yeah.
Eventually, I would
Eventually,
imagine, yeah. Eventually, it was.
Yeah.
It was accelerated
That's true.
because they got canceled.
Yeah, that's true.
They got 13 episodes or whatever it was, and then the movie.
Then the movie. I forgot about that.
But I mean, I'm sure that was the arc he had planned. He
Yeah.
probably had it planned for 5 years
Yeah.
or so.
Yeah.
But that's a real common thing: is to start low and end high.
It's like the traditional hero's journey. Like if you look at mythology and pretty much tons of legends from all over the world, that's 100% what it is.
Like the Joseph Campbell thing that he wrote
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
But I think he says that fantasy games are like the hero's journey, and I think what we're saying is that we see that in sci-fi as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the whole like a fantasy hero oftentimes, can't die if they fall off anything, or like if you're talking about Exalted, where you can walk between the raindrops.
Right.
That is much more common in fantasy settings, and I agree that kind of high fantasy, where you
was
can
also-
dodge literally everything, including a concept. Right? You can dodge ideas because you can dodge anything. Right?
Well, we know that from reading emails.
Yeah.
But
Right.
So
Even
I agree that
Star Trek Enterprise. It started out, we're on a ship, we don't know what we're doing, we're fucking up a lot, the ship's fucking up a lot, and it ends with founding the Federation.
Yeah.
Right.
Or and
all right.
It seems to me that's a very typical thing. I don't know. The field is going to change in most games. I think. I don't think it's going to stay. I don't think you can have a fantasy game that starts out low and stays low, and that's fine.
that's hard to do, I think, in RPGs because of like almost every RPG has some sort of leveling system. So as you progress, the players get more powerful. You have to give them a little bit different challenges to make things still be challenges. I mean, you can sit down and specifically plan a game that doesn't have power creep, but that's going to be hard to do. That's going to be like I've done that with some games where you're like, okay, we're not going to progress the characters. We're going to stay at what we start as. And things like that.
I think that's very specific to D&D, though. I think other games you don't have that kind of movement up. I mean, you get better at your skills, etc., but you're not necessarily.
See, I
But
think
you get XP and you spend it on stuff and get better at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only game I can think of that has as close to a flat character progression is Traveler, which is you have to sit and study for 1,000 hours or whatever it is, or 500 hours to get your one character point. You know
But
what
if
I
you
mean?
played that game for a really long campaign, like if you played the same campaign of Traveler for 2 years, like your character could progress a shit ton.
Oh yeah.
In that time, like I mean, it's not going to be as fast as you're right. D&D is like a little bit of a fast tracked.
But also, like
That's
with Traveler,
baked into the story of D&D too.
like getting some sort of like giant ship that could kick ass
Oh, right.
would be the thing that you would do, not your character getting better.
Yeah, I mean, equipment is kind of character
Yeah.
character advancement in that sense.
But like, so I think that's. I mean, there are certain games like Shadowrun, and it's also said here, like Shadowrun. Part of the genre, part of the idea, is that you can't change the world because of there's so much money and so much power, and you are trying to not bow down to the man.
Right.
And that's why you're a Shadowrun. That's why you don't have a system identification number. And you are going to fuck the man as much as you can until you die, which
Right.
could be tomorrow. That is a game where you are not going to change the world. You're just not. It is part of the cyberpunk genre. And I think that's fine.
Yeah. But
But no matter how much you get better, you just can't take on a mega corporation, let alone 10.
But I think like, yes, you will not save the world in that, but I think you can still have a major progression and a major storyline where learn. And I haven't played Shadowrun a ton. I've only done a couple one-shots of it, where you can, like, make a huge impact on the area you live in.
Well,
You can, and things like that, which can be just as heroic and just as much of a growth arc if you're like, hey, you're starting from nothing. Hey, I own, this one beat-up little shack that I work at, and...
I mean, all games you should make an impact. Otherwise, it doesn't feel useful. Doesn't feel like you're doing anything.
But we were comparing, like, episodic, like, yeah, there's small, like we're talking about Firefly. Like, yeah, they save people, but it's not, and eventually it was going to be this big arc where they fight Vegas. But there's also, it's like, hey, they go and they save this one little town, and then they move on to the next thing, and the next group, nobody knows who they are.
Right.
So it's a little bit more, it's more like a Monster of the Week type thing almost, where you've got, like, X-Files or something like that, where it's like, yeah, they're making impacts, but it's not overall changing their lives. They're not becoming heroes that are renowned everywhere. Like, they still go back to their crummy apartments at the end of the day, stuff like that. I think those are two very different types of things, and at least that was what I was understanding we were kind of comparing.
What I thought we were talking about, this may have gotten away from me, is that, in general, role-playing games will get up to the point where you are doing huge world-bending, world-changing things.
Yes.
And I don't think that's true.
No, I don't either. I'm just saying that I think that there are copious examples in both science fiction and fantasy where that happens.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if the feel, that level of grandeur, for lack of a better term, is necessarily a defining difference between science fiction and fantasy. Because I mean, a lot of fantasy games start low and end high, and I mean, I can think of a lot of science fiction that does the same.
I'd agree.
But so I don't know.
I think there is a different feel, but I'm not sure that is why. Like, I think that Len is correct. Like, there is a different feel to it, but I don't necessarily agree that it's because of that. I don't know.
Well, if there wasn't a different feel to it, we wouldn't be like, Star Wars is not sci-fi.
Right.
That's fucking fantasy.
Right, I know.
Like,
Yeah.
And be very serious about this delineation.
Yeah.
Well, you should at least nod to science if it's going to be science fiction
Yeah.
or science fantasy.
Yeah, as opposed
That's
to
why I call it
run out of
space
gas
fantasy.
and, like, slow down in space.
Right. Nice bank turns.
Oh, yeah.
That's one thing I loved. What was it that did that right?
I don't know.
Was it Babylon 5? Babylon 5? No, they did fighter plane. Did they fighter plane turns? I don't remember.
I don't know.
Didn't they have the ships? No, Battlestar
Battlestar, I was
Galactica.
going to
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
Battlestar did a
did.
lot of stuff well as
Yeah.
far as...
But there's another example of a science fiction show that starts low and ends lower. Spoilers.
That's so good.
It
Yeah.
is. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think that progression from low to high or low to low or low to lower, I think the low to low or low to lower is the exception to the rule,
Yeah.
generally
Oh, yeah.
speaking, in most genres.
It's interesting, too, because...
Except maybe Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Battlestar is an interesting example, too, because there are very much fantasy elements in that, as well as very sci-fi
Oh,
elements.
absolutely, yeah.
Like, there are things, I'm not going to say what they are, because it's fantastic, and if you haven't watched it, fucking watch the show, that are not explained. They are meant to be, this was other beings, or, like,
Right.
it's like this outside of science thing that happens, and and it's weird, and it stands out so much more because so much of it is like, oh yeah, these are gritty, pilots trying to, like, patch together these Vipers that are, like, super old just so they can survive, and, like, so much of it is traditional sci-fi.
But then there is sort of like a prophetic supernatural element to it.
that ends up coming into it, and you're like, huh,
And
okay.
it's cool,
And
too.
it still fucking works. I don't know how, but it's crazy.
It's not like Space Wizards, though.
It's not Space Wizards.
All right. Thank you for the email, Len.
Writer Lucas in the chat room says, one day Star Wars will be sci-fi.
But how?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, also there's another good example because the numbered movies, that's always a progression from low to high, right?
Well, and it's interesting because we all talk about what is a really bad one with the kid? Sorry.
Episode 1.
Yeah, episode 1.
Phantom Menace.
Phantom Menace, that one. Well, yeah, those are all bad, but specifically the one because in that episode, the one we all get so annoyed about, they tried to be more sci-fi. they gave
an explanation for the Force.
A scientific explanation for having the Force.
They were stupid.
It was stupid.
All you need is antibiotics, and there's no Jedi.
But I mean, and I think that's a good example of how everyone rejected that utterly, because it's not something we expect in sci-fi. Where if in Star Trek or something else that is more traditionally sci-fi, someone's like, oh, they're able to levitate things. Oh, it's because of this special thing in their blood. We're like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
They have some bullshit explanation for why that works.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to say about Star Wars before we go is that everybody talks about, Luke goes from low to high. He's just a farm boy, and then he turns into a Jedi. And I kind of feel like if this was a role-playing game, you have Ben Kenobi, who's fucking badass. Right? You have Han Solo, who's fucking incredible pilot.
Right.
You have Chewie, who can tear people's
arms off.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that Luke is right up there with them. He's a badass pilot who shoots a bunch of fucking shit down the first time he's ever in one of these fucking things.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And also, he does shoot, a missile that makes a 90-degree turn.
Yeah.
Or two missiles that make a 90-degree turn.
Yes.
Right? And so, throughout, even though he is he does, from a role-playing, mechanical perspective, he's kicking ass.
Yeah, he's got the advantage savant pilot or something.
Just as much ass as everybody else kicks. So I don't necessarily think he's coming from that low of a place. He just, as a player, is playing him like a dipshit.
But he ends up at a much higher place once he can do all the other crazy Force shit. Don't they explain away the fact that he can do that by the fact that he's a Force sensitive? That's why he's such a good pilot.
Right, but that's a thing you'd have to buy for your character.
Right, yeah.
Right? So you'd have to... There's a ton of stuff you'd have to have on your character sheet in order to be able to have a character like Luke, because he's actually a badass.
Remember how I had a Force character in Edge of the Empire. It was fucking expensive as fuck.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh, no, I don't know anything about it because I can't afford any of that fucking talent tree. Bullshit.
I can move a pebble.
Yeah. Oh, man.
And bullshit.
It's crazy. I was like, I can be that and nothing else.
Right.
No, I'll be
You can be that, but you're also a worm in a jar.
Yeah, pretty much. It was crazy.
All right. Gaming in existing IP from Eric in New Jersey. Now, I'm still not convinced that we haven't heard this.
We might have. Oh, Almighty Dishes of Yore, I feel like.
Oh, we had more Star Wars.
Yeah. I feel like this might have been read. I don't know. Start reading and I'll see.
It is off.
Hello, Stu. And the almighty douches of yore. It is I, Eric, from New Jersey, with the need to discuss something. In this case, I would like to discuss using established intellectual properties as a campaign. Did we do this?
I feel like
That's I'm wondering if we did.
Yeah, I think we did.
See, I did a search and I couldn't find it.
I think this might be the one that actually maybe...
Maybe, is it a reply to it, maybe? No, it was New Jersey.
Let me do.
Okay.
I'm going to do a quick Google Doc search.
Okay.
Because I do remember discussing this in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Very specifically.
Because my opinion was, fuck everything they've done. I want my characters. I want to use this world and make it my bitch.
Yeah, I think a lot
and
of
you guys
us
are like,
wanted
why would you play in the world?
Yes.
I just put in.
That is the Dresden Files
I
discussion.
put in a quoted text string, and the only document that comes up is this one.
Weird.
I don't know. Let's go ahead and power through it.
Okay.
All right.
That'll be fun to see if we have two different conclusions.
Sure.
Based
Yeah.
on how much we had to drink tonight versus the other.
I haven't
Won't be the first time. I haven't had anything.
Yeah.
I have an empty can of AW root beer.
I need a drink. Many times I've heard or read comments to the effect of, why would I want to do things in a world where the major stuff has already been done? To this I reply, hogwash! You just have to set up some expectations in your session 0 and or be imaginative in your campaign creation. Let's use Star Wars as an example, since I've been running Star Wars games on and off since 1987. First, and this has been suggested by you, the Happy Jacks hosts, is that from the moment in the timeline you start the campaign, canon is out the window. If you start your game between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, if your PC somehow killed Darth Vader, then Darth Vader is dead. Empire Strikes Back happens very differently at that point, or maybe someone steps up to take Vader's place. Who knows? Characters and situations cannot be protected in this case. While this may cause certain things to never happen, it leads to an exciting timeline where the PCs are the main focus. The other way is that they don't have to interact with the characters in the movie at all. Man, I remember this. Using Star Wars as an example again, the galaxy is big. The Star Wars universe isn't just the characters involved, but also about fighter planes having dogfights. It isn't breaking up the enemy installations, breaking out of the same installation, and then blowing up said installation. Luke Skywalker blew up a Death Star with his space wizard abilities. Ooh.
I don't think we read this.
Maybe your players have to team up with their enemies to fight off an alien invasion on the other side of the galaxy. Too bad everyone else is too busy fighting each other to deal with that hot mess. Granted, I took a lot of inspiration from the D6 Star Wars modules, which were amazing! I keeping the Star Wars flavor, and then expanding on them to make a campaign. In other words, your PCs have more important things to do than blowing up some Imperial space station. Finally, you could do something completely out of left field, which would feel less like the intellectual property, but still be fun. We had a campaign called The Stars Are Right Wars, which was the Cthulhu mythos in the Star Wars universe.
Oh, cool.
Ooh.
That's fun.
Hilarity was had by all, and the undead Wookiees are freaking scary.
Oh.
Look, all I'm saying is it can be done and done well with a little imagination. Be it Star Wars, Harry Potter, whatever established license floats your boat. I would also argue that an established world is also easier for new players if they are familiar with the world in question because they know the tropes already. Anyway, I hope this provides some food for thought. May your glasses always be full and the dice roll in your favor.
Thank you.
Well, I think why this seems familiar is we did have an email about existing IPs,
Yeah.
and I mentioned the fact that when I ran the FFG Traveler or Star Wars game, that I set it in a period of time when there really wasn't a lot of canon, which was after Episode 6.
Yeah.
And because it's like, okay, you know that the Empire's going to fall, and my assumption was this is going to take a while because it's big.
Yeah, it's massive.
So you can have stories about what's going on there with these different Moffs and Grand Moffs, jockeying for position and trying to
hide the fact the Emperor had died.
right,
Yeah.
or create their own fiefdoms or
Yes.
whatever it is they want to do. So I mean, and that could be a really interesting. That's a really interesting place to have a story. Just have a good system to run it in.
Yeah.
I definitely think I would have remembered undead Wookiees. Like, I feel like
Right.
that's something
Yeah,
that
no, I
would
don't
stick
think-
in my
Must have been very similar.
head. I think so.
Yeah, well, he sent it in August 28.
Yeah. All right.
Which isn't that long ago.
Yeah.
And I did 2 or 3. I like grabbed a piece of text, put it in quotes, and did a Google Docs search. And I've done it in the
Still
past,
okay.
and it will say, "Oh no, I forgot to mark this email as read on it."
Yeah.
So
I agree. Like,
Go ahead.
especially when you're talking about it's really easy for people to jump in the IPs they're familiar with. That's one of the reasons that I've run a lot of con games that are based on different IPs. I did a Harry Potter game where I tweaked Wild Talents to do Harry Potter spells. I've done a bunch on video games.
have you done
things
Friendship
like that.
is Madness?
I have not done that one,
You should
no.
do Friendship
But
is Madness.
yeah, I should.
Wait, what?
Yeah, well, the Laser Ponies game, and there was a Laser Ponies meme for a while that was like a Cthulhu head on a My Little Pony.
Friendship is madness.
Yeah.
I'm into it. I'm into it on that.
Yes.
Into it.
Do it. And I did the Skyrim one and all these different things. And it is so easy for people to jump in. Oh, and I've done a Star Wars one.
Right.
And Wild Talents too, actually, where people were droids. It's super easy for people to jump in on that and know the world. And once they get their bearings, it's seamless. And it's, especially for one-shots, and especially for con one-shots, and you don't always know who's going to be at your table, picking popular IPs like that is kind of a shortcut to really getting everyone involved in moving things
Yeah,
along.
everyone knows what it feels like and how they're going to act in it, and they
Yeah.
know a lot about the world.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm not really a stickler about canon, but I'm not comfortable fucking with canon.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because one of the things that makes I know you are, but one of the things that makes Star Wars is that there's like these movies that told these stories, and we all like them, and you fuck with them too much, you're gonna piss people off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas if you just find some place or find a time that doesn't fit. Now it's hard in Star Wars. I mean, if you got someone who's like really hardcore and has read all those freaking novels, there may not be a second of Star Wars galaxy history that hasn't been covered
Yeah, no, it
somewhere.
hasn't.
But if you're just going by the movies, there's lots of dead spaces in there that you could go in and tell an interesting story, and it can be a galaxy-changing story too.
Yeah. My one shot that I did of Star Wars was when they were getting the Death Star plans, and at the time there was another movie to explain it. It was like many Bothans died to bring us this information.
Right.
Well, the players were all the droids on the ship, and all the Bothans died, and they were the droids because they'd used like a poison to kill everybody on the ship, and the droids were like, "Oh fuck, well we're here now." And
Well, let's start throwing the Bothans off.
So, but then the droids then had to decide, like, were they going to continue the mission? Were they going to do the stuff? So then they eventually did, and they got the Death Star plans to the rebellion.
The second Death Star. Because
Yeah.
the Bothans died for the second,
second,
Death Star
yeah.
plans.
Okay, sorry, this specified the second Death Star. I
not a
looked all that
stickler
stuff
for
up before
canon.
the game. I totally knew. Yeah, well, yeah.
It's only because I made that same mistake and I got corrected on it.
Yeah.
Because that's in Jedi, or I don't remember which one it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I love using like established worlds. I also just like making them my own, just like I like to do with role playing game systems. I don't think anybody has said like don't use IPs, don't use
No.
popular
No.
IPs. But like,
I think a lot of people have opinions on what's the right or wrong way
right.
to do it, and it's different for everyone.
Like for me, I have suddenly really gotten into the new Star Trek game because the Dune game is supposed to be coming out at the end of this year, and it's the D20 system. So I'm like just poring over it, and now I got all these Star Trek ideas in my head.
Now,
But
sorry to interrupt. Do you know what the scope of the Dune game is? Is it still Arrakis?
It's the first book. Actually, yes, I think that is the scope of the Dune game. It's the first book.
Oh, it is. Okay. That I wouldn't play that.
I
That
love
story's
the
been
first
told.
book. Oh man, that's the best.
I
But
like
anyway.
the first Dune, but that story's been told.
But see, it's all the information from it,
Right.
right? Like in the game that I would play, Jessica had a daughter, like she was supposed to, instead of a son. There's no Paul Atreides. Cool.
Right.
Go. All of the Fremen are still there. Everybody's still there. But, and now you have to do something.
You do like multiverse stuff, like alternate universe.
Yeah, so
cool.
this is the world that we're playing in now.
Yeah.
And
like,
that means that Baron Harkonnen is going to come in and fuck everyone's heart hole.
unless the players stop it, right? And that's why the players have to do shit,
Right.
to stop Baron Harkonnen from fucking everybody's heart hole, because he will, and the Beast Raban will eat them afterwards.
Right.
Yeah.
So like,
You don't remember Dune?
I've never read it or seen it.
They had heart plugs. He all of it, not all of them, but most of the Harkonnen's household had heart plugs installed. That basically is almost like they like fuse the heart muscle to the surface of your chest, and there's a plug there. And if he wants to kill you, he just pulls it.
he pulls the literal plug.
He pulls the plug, and all your blood pumps out of the heart hole.
And then
He never
touches-
actually screws anyone on the heart hole in it, but he's so gross.
Yeah.
He is so gross. I always figured he probably did.
Charming.
So yeah, I mean,
He's a piece of work.
But I think that's a great example of what I would do with the IP, because you know who the Fremen are, right?
Right,
You
yeah.
know who Stilgar is. Stilgar's still alive.
Right.
Johnny's still alive. Everybody is still doing stuff. You can interact with all these characters.
Right.
Just it is in a completely different way than like, oh, there's Paul, and we're gonna hang out with him.
Yeah.
Or like with the Star Trek thing I was talking about was once you start getting to the end of DS9 and Voyager, they're doing literal magic.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then it gets worse from there. So I don't want to do stuff after stuff they've done in the TV shows, but I don't want to go even further back, like where, okay, well, we're doing the Wright brothers now, Star Trek.
Right.
So it's like, okay, well, I want something like maybe at the time of the Dominion Wars, but not the Dominion Wars, because that is very specifically based on DS9 because of the Bajoran wormhole and all of that.
Right.
And because that is so very specific to that, I'll just change it a little. Maybe when they went in to like barter with the whoever it was to keep the wormhole open, they said no, and the wormhole's closed forever. Cool. Now we move on. Now you have a world where there's at least technology that makes some sense, and all these factions that are happening. You can create some sort of bullshit in that world.
Nice.
But you still have all the same ships. You still have all the same characters. Jean-Luc Picard is still going around and doing this shit.
Well,
So
that's. I mean,
it gives you a world to play in that you already know.
Yeah.
the
I
franchise
like
kind
that.
of.
I have no problems with stuff like that. Like
The
I think-
franchise kind of did that, but they rewound
Right.
Enterprise. I think it's one of the best series. Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah.
and Voyager too. They had like time travel stuff. In
Well,
Voyager.
they've always had time travel. You just got to go around the sun fast enough.
That's Superman.
Yeah. Yeah, but it had one of the greatest punk songs ever in that song.
But no, I like that. I like the alternate universe stuff. I could get into that. That's very cool.
See, but like we remember when there was a point when you were talking about running a Dresden Files game, and my hackles and I know your hackles both got up and we were like, that is not.
I don't know.
That is not Dresden Files.
If we
Like,
had it
that was crazy
happen.
bullshit. Like everybody's dead.
Just like take a deep breath and kind of sit up a little straighter. Maybe Tappy, you should consider.
Doing something else.
Don't have anyone
Not
who likes
that.
the books in that game.
Yeah,
And then it turns out I did. So
Yeah.
I did a different game.
yeah.
And that has made all the difference.
Right.
I have a question.
Yes.
Call of Cthulhu, sci-fi or fantasy?
What is it? It's horror.
Right, but I
Yeah.
mean, like if you had to pick one of those for it, because it's got elements of both. I don't know.
I don't think it's. I don't think it.
It's neither?
I don't think
Okay.
it's either. It's its own genre. It's a horror game. I mean, it has a science fiction element because the elder gods are all supposedly aliens, but it's certainly not science
But
fiction.
they certainly do stuff that is kind of like magic.
Sure, yeah.
Right.
I mean, you can cast spells and shit.
Yeah.
It's just terribly, terribly costly.
Yeah.
I think it's. I don't think it fits in either. I mean, if I had, if you put a gun to my head and says you have to pick one, I would say science fiction.
Okay.
Only because of the alien thing, and sufficiently advanced technology. That horse shit.
It's just scientific magic.
Right.
Because if they're aliens, I mean, there's science that we don't know about that can do all
Exactly,
this sort of
yeah.
stuff, and it just
They can fold space.
holding space is dope.
Bill in the chat room is asking, why would Cthulhu be sci-fi? Because the aliens are all the elder gods are supposed to be aliens. They're all from other planets.
That's what-
and there's the Yithians who live on like the Yithians. Who am I thinking of? The ones that are the fungus that live in Pluto.
That is beyond my knowledge. I'm
Are
sorry.
they
And that's like an alien.
plutocracy?
Heyo, there are alien species that also lives in like underground. They live in like underground oil well mines and
Yeah,
shit.
you get a high five for that. That was nice.
Migo, it's the Migo, yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I mean,
That would be a great name for social meteors. Instead of MeWe.
Migo,
Go.
you go, Migo. All right, I'm gonna call it.
Okay.
All right.
Is this the right one? It is.
Yay.
Thank you for joining us for season 25, episode 9 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu,
My name is Kimmy.
It's good as Tappy.
and we'll see you next week, 7 p.m. Pacific, 7:12 p.m. Pacific time. HappyJacks.org/live, and that's it.
Yep.
Oh, we got a con coming up in February, but that's a ways away still.
Long ways away.
And so we'll see you then, and thank you very much. And I'll leave you the song.
Till no emails remain. Oh, Happy Jacks, our patron saint of the skillful game master. Oh, guide us well with yes ending to avert a disaster. Whether fate or GURPS or millions of apocalyptic hacks, fellow listeners will always have our backs. Unless you're playing D&D and then they'll give you crap.
We're out of time and out of space, lamenting for the human race. A cataclysmic crisis from the past. A small blue world, a thunder's horn, an apocalyptic nightmare born. And mankind better learn to cope with it fast. Watch the glittering protectors rise! Inhuman foes meet your demise! And boom, 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 your end is nigh. Another night, another fight. We battle by the glowing light of fallen foes in funeral pyres ablaze. No quarter shall we give our foe, and neither will they, and this we know, as kinetic flares flash upon our display. Watch the glittering protectors rise! Inhuman foes meet your demise! And boom, 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 your end is nigh.
The preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire.
Why problem make when you no problem have, you don't want to make?